Welcome to Explore the World. Right now, during this time of closed borders and quarantine requirements, we can't send you to the world, so we're bringing the world to you. And one of the ways we're doing that is through this virtual speaker series. So today we are going to have three faculty members, Professor Beth Gulley in English, Professor Emeritus Sheila Phillip from theater, who still works with the college's Performing Arts series, and Chef Aaron Prater from our culinary school. And they have all traveled or lived, worked in Asia. And so today they're going to tell us about what they saw, what they experienced, what they learned. And one of the things I love about my job is the opportunity to vicariously travel through people. Because I can't get to all the places that everybody, there's only so many places one person can go. And so now I get to learn about other places through you. So we've decided we've always been going in alphabetical order by first name. So we're going to do that again. Chef Prater will start. If you have questions for him, please put them in the chat box and we're going to have time at the end for our faculty to respond to them. So thanks. Chef Prater, the time is yours.
Sure, thanks. So I'm probably wildly unprepared because I don't have any photos or slides or anything. You just get to listen to me ramble on for a bit about my life. So when I was 19 years old, I enlisted, well, when I was 18, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And when I was 19, they said, "You're going to Japan." And I had never, prior to boot camp, I had never even been on a plane before. And somehow my orders got screwed up. So when I arrived in Japan, there was no one there to meet me. So I was wandering around this airport in Okinawa, and Dawn, you've been to Okinawa. It's not a very big airport. There's not a lot there. For hours, just trying to find someone in uniform that would take me someplace where I could have a rest, because that's a long flight. And for one of my first flights ever, I didn't sleep a whole lot. But one of the things that struck me immediately when I got there was just how foreign everything was. Signs, not only were they not in English, they weren't even in English characters. And I was completely lost. And a lot of countries, since I've traveled, somebody speaks English. And in a lot of Japan, a lot of them speak English. 25 years ago in Okinawa, there weren't as many English speakers. And so I couldn't find anybody to help me for a while. And I felt a moment of panic because I did not know where I was or what to do or where to go. And over the course of the 2 years that I was stationed there, I realized that everybody's the same. We're the same the world over. And I just immersed myself in the culture as much as possible. Even though I wasn't a cook at the time, food has always been a part of my life. And so I was a journalist. And as a journalist, my job was to tell stories. And in the morning, I would go interview Marines, ask them how they do their jobs and things like that. And then they would go to the mess hall, and I would go back to my office and I would write a story and post it for the week. We had to do 5-6 stories a week. And because of that short timeline, we got paid extra money to basically feed ourselves. And so rather than go to the Burger King that was on campus or whatever they had, I would just walk down to the markets in Japan and figure out what I was going to make. I didn't know anything. I didn't know any of the ingredients. I couldn't figure it out. I remember one of my first trips, I walked by a tank of live turtles. And I was like, is that food or is that pets? And if it's food, wow, what do? Do they kill it for you? Do you got to take it home and kill it? I don't even know how to get a turtle out of the shell. Like today, as a chef of 15 years, I still don't know how to get a turtle out of the shell. And so what really became important for me in that trip was that I recognized how small we are and how connected we all are, but also how limited my view of the world was, how small my understanding was. And I am originally from New Orleans, and New Orleans is, if you've never been, is almost like another country. We have a very strong food culture. We have a very, very strong traditions, very proud traditions that we follow. And so I was maybe open to some of those ideas of looking at a different viewpoint, but I just learned so much And over the course of the 2 years, they sent me everywhere because that's what the military does. They don't care what you want. And I got to go to Thailand. And for as everything that Japan was, Japan has a tendency to be fairly ordered and fairly rigid. Thailand was the opposite. Even if you look at the letters in their alphabet, Japan, it's very methodical and very precise. And in Thailand, there's this sort of sinuous curves to it. It just seems more fluid and more languid. And it was just really interesting to see, even though I'm in my naive view of the world was, oh, Asia, they're all Asians and it's all sort of a homogenous culture. Just like Westerners, we share a lot of similarities. No, right? Just completely different. And I just really learned that my viewpoint, my tiny world view, I graduated, I don't know if anybody knows where Odessa is, but I graduated high school from Odessa, Missouri. It's not a global hotspot, right? My small view coming out of Odessa just was completely blown away. And I started to have a lot of empathy for people that had just different circumstances in 100 different ways. I mean, you would see these families in Thailand riding, it was a scooter, like a small scooter, like even skinnier than a Vespa. And there would be, dad would be driving, mom would be in the back, holding on to him and holding one kid. And if it was raining, the kid might be holding an umbrella, right? And they were a wealthy family because they had that motorcycle. And it just really shattered a lot of preconceived notions I had about what life was and how people lived. And it just really made my appreciation of people more, it just opened it up tremendously. Years later, after I got out of the military, all I wanted to do was cook and be around food and drink. And I attended Johnson County Community College, and upon graduation, I applied for a program, and the college sent me to Korea, where I competed in a cooking competition and culinary program with some young Korean. It was actually chefs from all over sort of the Pacific Rim. I don't know why Kansas City got involved, but Philippines, Thailand, Japan, China. And the one thing that I really learned in that trip, because I got to focus more on my craft and my food, was that you never cook better. You never cook your own food better when you have to get out of your comfort zone, when you have to explain it to somebody else. So here I am in 2 hours south of Seoul, trying to explain how to make red beans and rice to cooks in Korea who have a completely different idea. When you say red bean, it means something completely different to them, right? And it just really built this passion in me to keep studying more and keep learning that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And in the kitchen, there's 1,000 ways to cook. And the Eastern philosophies of food are so vastly different from sort of the classic rigid French version that we teach at Johnson County and that most of the world teach. In fact, pretty much every culinary school in the world teaches this classic Western philosophy of the mother sauces and the Scoffier and Karim and all these, and it's great food. It's amazing food, but it's a myopic view. I found a school in Hong Kong that actually teaches. They do both. They teach the French view, but they also teach the more Eastern styles of cooking and the different philosophies. When you're in Japan, or if you're a cook in America or pretty much anywhere in the West, you learn how to make everything. You make the pasta, you make the roast, you make the soup, you make the dessert. You learn a little bit of all of that. But if you're a cook in Japan, you're an udon chef. You're not going to go make sushi. You make udon, and that's what you do, and that's all you do. And it's just a very different philosophy. They focus and practice on one particular craft, and I don't know how you build a curriculum around that, but that's one of the things I hope to do when we can open back up, is take students to Hong Kong to see this Western or Eastern philosophy and counter it to our Western philosophy. One of the things that I read years ago was that ancient Chinese chefs would always put 5 colors in a dish because the 5 colors represented the 5 elements that make up the world. And I always thought this was a fantastic idea because, I mean, variety is literally the spice of life in this case, right? If you've got 5 different things on the plate, it's going to taste way different than if you've got like 3 different kinds of mushrooms, right? Or 2 different kinds of beef. And and then also just this idea of harmony and balance is built into some of their food, whereas we're like, just throw more butter or throw more cream or throw some wine on it, right? And so I just really got into this idea of looking at the way the world looks at food differently. And since then, I went last year, I was able to, the college sent me to Taiwan for an International Food Studies Conference. Thanks to Jeanette and her office, I just got awarded an opportunity to go to Thailand again and Vietnam to study street food and how those unique crops that are being grown there that are actually a huge immigrant culture has moved to Kansas City, and they're growing a lot of those crops there. And even local farmers are starting to adopt some of them because they suit this climate really well. How they preserve those crops, how they cook with those crops, and how maybe our sustainable agriculture students could then use some of those ideas to market things and create things in their own programs. And so I just really have fought. Once I got over my initial hesitation and fear, I realized I love seeing differences, and I love seeing the world and different people and how they, mostly how they eat, because I'm always hungry, I think. And that's the other thing I realized. It doesn't matter where you come from. Everybody gets hungry. Rich, poor, Asian, American, French, we all eat, we all get hungry. So it's a great commonality. And you can always walk to any place, anywhere in the world. And if you offer food, somebody's always going to be your friend, right? That's always like an easy way to break bread and just create, community. Do we have any questions? I don't want to take too much time. You're
muted, Jeanette.
Anyway, thanks, Aaron. That was perfect. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, but we'll answer them at the end. So thanks. And we do all get hungry, and food is like a universal language, and it really does build community. So Professor Gully, next.
And I do have a PowerPoint.
You should be able to share your screen. Give it a try. Give it a try.
Get there. Okay. Hold on. Maureen taught me something new this morning, how to make it so you're actually seeing my slideshow. Although I think I maybe put my pictures way too far and you might not be able to see them all. I'm sorry. I need to plan for PowerPoint better, I think. So I'm Professor Gully. I see like 9 of my students here, so I'm really excited to see you because I don't get to meet most of you in person very often. So hello, and I'm so glad that you're here. So I'm here to talk mainly about my travels to China. So I got interested in China when I was really young because my grandfather lived in China for 8 years before he came back to the US and married my grandmother and had my father. And so my whole life I've been hearing stories about China and his time in China. And one of my elderly relatives did a really nice thing and interviewed him and did a cassette tape. And so when I was a little kid, we would be taking a road trip and my dad would play the cassette tape of my grandfather telling his stories about going to China. So when my chair, Dr. Keith Geeky, said, hey, we're doing this project with China and would you like to get involved? I was like, well, yes, sign me up. I'm right here. So, because, I had all these thoughts and memories about my grandfather and his time. And she had for a long time done what we call a COIL project she had been doing it with students in Russia and Morocco. And I think she had all sorts of connections going, and she wanted to start one with China. And we have at the college a long history with Northwestern Polytechnical University. I have their seal. They go by the acronym NPU, and then they had to change it for some reason. They were competing with another university who wanted the same initials, so now they go by NWPU. And we have visiting scholars that come from there. So Keith had it set up where I had 10 students that were studying at NPU who were in an online class taking Comp 1 with me. And so after that, I got to meet them and they made connections with my Comp 1 students here in the US. And then I was able to travel and I took my son and my husband and we went and spent 2 weeks at NPU, which was pretty amazing. So that's what, these are 3 of the students that I had in that first class. And I got to, if you see over here, this is me at the hotel on campus with Sun Jing. She was a visiting scholar who came here to JCCC for a year and then went back. And when I visited for my 2-week visit, she had me co-teach in 4 of her classes. So we prepared together and then I taught an hour and then she taught an hour. And so I got to see her teach and she got to have me in and interact with her students. And that was really interesting. And then there was another teacher. So I actually co-taught in 6 classes that first trip. And then as Zhang Yi, the head of the department, is want to do, she's like, oh, I want you to give 2 presentations. Well, I didn't know that. And then she's like, oh, let me suggest you some topics. So she gave me topics after I was already there, didn't really have very good access to the internet. And then she's like, you should give a presentation on these topics, which is really typical of how she likes to do things. I think she likes to put people off guard a little bit, but also what I learned was that Chinese people on mainland China live with uncertainty in a way that we in the US are really uncomfortable with. Like when we travel, we have a plan, right? We have an itinerary and we're going to do this and we're going to go here. And, when I teach my class, like I have a plan and this is how it's going to go. And this is my syllabus that was approved by the state of Kansas, and this is how things are going to go. And this is what I should expect. And, sometimes things veer off from that. But Chinese people in the mainland, at least the ones that I got to know, and I looked at the uncertainty scale and they live with and are much more comfortable with uncertainty than we are. And so one of the things, so anyway, I was there, Zhang Yi had me give these presentations. We got to do some cool touring around. This is me on Muslim Street eating a food called pamwa, which is like this broth that you break bread up into. And it's really famous in Xi'an. She was like, oh, you should come back and teach here for a year. And I was like, how about 6 months? And she's like, no, a year. So I came back to the US and I applied for a sabbatical. And that was a little bit of a process. And it's not without precedent, but most of the time people take a 1 semester sabbatical. But I got permission to take a year sabbatical to go back and live in Xi'an and teach at this university for a year, which was awesome. So by the way, Xi'an is a small, so China's cities are huge. Like there's a city I visited that people keep thinking I'm mispronouncing the name because nobody's ever heard of it, but it has 13 million people who live there. And they're like, oh, that's a small town. That's a little village, right? Xi'an is actually bigger. A lot of people have heard of Xi'an, but it is in what looks like to me the middle, but they would say that it's more in the west. Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an, this map is maybe a little bit skewed so that it looks smaller, but so Xi'an is pretty landlocked and it's pretty far north. And over here I have a picture of Xi'an City. It is actually really cool because it was on the Silk Road. So they're an old historic city. They were the end of the Silk Road, or from my Western perspective, the end, right? From their perspective, they're the beginning of the Silk Road. That goes, back across into Europe. And they had this old city wall, which goes all the way around the old city. That's really cool. And the university, the old campus of the university is just outside of the city wall. So that's what this is. Actually, I love the Xi'an City Wall. I think it's cooler than the Great Wall of China, which just looks like stairs. But the Xi'an City Wall, you get up there and it's flat and you can ride a bicycle like all the way around the perimeter. Like you can rent one, so you don't have to bring one with you, right? Or you can just walk on it and it's really beautiful and you can see a long ways. And then they have a lot of cool ancient buildings inside. So that's where the campus at NPU has the old campus and the new campus. And we lived on the old campus and we worked on the new campus. And the new campus is way out of the city near the mountains. And I'm trying to watch because I know I can get off track. But one of the things I was really interested in, Jeanette was like, or Brooke was like, think about how this changed your life. So I lived there and I know Sheila's been a lot of cool places and has like way more cooler things to say than me. So I wanted to focus on what it was like to live there and to work in classrooms. So what you see here is the outside of my apartment. And then the inside, these people's houses, because when we moved into our apartment, which is on the campus, it didn't have a couch. And I was like, I wonder if Chinese people just don't have couches, which I know maybe that's a dumb thing to think, but I think we'll see pictures of Japanese homes where maybe, their furnishings are different than our Western thoughts. And I was like, oh, I wonder what Chinese people's houses are like. So we did eventually buy a couch and I have pictures of Chinese. I got to visit a lot of people's homes, which is really cool. And they do have couches. It just was my apartment that didn't have a couch. So we were on the old campus, which is in the heart of the city. And we lived in a building that had 5 floors. There was no elevator because you have to have 7 floors, more than 7 floors to have an elevator. So we walked up, our apartment was on the 3rd floor, which I think we were really lucky because I met people who were quite a bit older than we were, who were on the 7th floor and they had to walk all the way up to the top. So it wasn't so bad. We got a lot of good exercise. And you can see our apartment had a sitting room and then 3 bedrooms that were off of that. And then behind us, the kitchen was pretty small, but it was really well lit. I think that the apartments are really well built so that you can open windows on both sides and the breeze will go through. We did have air conditioners. They take a lot of electricity. They're like the plug-in kind to the wall. So we didn't use it very much. And the heat is turned on by the government, which was a big surprise to me. I had not ever imagined that, right? That I wouldn't be able to control my own heat. So October was a little cold because their temperatures are fairly similar to ours because they're up pretty far north and they're pretty well landlocked. And November was pretty cold. And around November 15th, the government turned the heat on and that was awesome. And then it was warm, but then you couldn't control how warm it was. And the same is true in the classrooms. So the classrooms didn't have air conditioning and they didn't have heat until the government turned the heat on. But we did have good ceiling fans and we had big windows that we could open. So you can see behind me, we had a washing machine, but not a dryer. So we had this place outside of our bedroom where we would hang up our clothes. And a lot of Chinese people told me that they think dryers are not environmentally friendly. Some of my students were like, well, they think that air conditioning is not environmentally friendly. And both of those things are probably true. I think we maybe make them more efficient here in the US than the way that they would do it in China, but probably they're right that it's more environmentally friendly to hang dry your clothes and to just deal with the temperatures that come your way. We did not have an oven either, which is pretty typical of a Chinese home, not to have an oven. Some of the other foreigners you could purchase one if you tried really hard. So some of the other foreign teachers had ovens, but we did not. Our adventure to get a couch was really fun though. Soon Jing took me to the furniture market where we got a bed for my son and the couch. And then this guy put the furniture on a little cart, and she told him where my address was. And then he brought it to my apartment. And but it was like an open air market, but it was just, they were selling furniture instead of vegetables. So that was kind of exciting. So you can see there in the background is the couch, and my son, who has received shoes in the mail from his grandmother, because Chinese men's feet are smaller than my son and my husband's feet. So I couldn't buy my son shoes in the store, but he wore them out. So I ordered them, my mom mailed them to me. And this is, so you can see there are bedrooms in the back. So that's my son and my husband. My son, I know I need to watch my time, so I need to hurry on. I'm sorry. My son got to tutor these two kids in English, and so then we got so that we would go every Thursday and eat dinner with them, and they would cook us fun Chinese foods. They were really cute, and they had a really cute little dog. And their parents, their dad was a principal of an elementary school that was on campus, and their mom was a teacher. And she was a really good teacher. And so she helped us to learn Chinese too, which was great. And then this, some of you may have met, if you work here, you may have met Xiaodan. She went by Danny. She was one of the visiting scholars. And she had just had her second baby, as did Baohua, who was also one of our visiting scholars. So the Chinese, for a long time, they were only allowed to have one child. But right around the time that Xiaodan came here as a visiting scholar, they changed the law and they allowed people to have 2 children. And so a whole bunch of people were having their second baby just because they finally could. So I didn't get to teach with her when I was there because she was on maternity leave, but we did get to go and visit her and meet her baby. As you can see, couches all around. And then my husband was a graduate student at KU, and his friend Chairu was also a graduate student, but she had gone back to this big town that nobody knows the name of. And we got to ride the high-speed train to go visit her. The high-speed train is the coolest thing in China. It goes so fast. It like floats right on magnets. And it's fun to ride. It gets you where you want to go really fast. And we rode it several times. Of all the things in China, I think that is the coolest. So this is some awesome food and other friends who visited. This right down here is what I used to eat for breakfast when I went over to the main campus and would go to the cafeteria. And these are Chinese pancakes and this broth with, it's like a tofu and maybe edamame in it. This was really, I found it was really delicious. I also learned to love to drink hot water. In fact, I went back through my blog and I was like, oh yeah, they gave me hot water every day when I went to the campus. In fact, at school, instead of having like water fountains with cold water, they would have hot water to drink. And you'd think that it wouldn't be so great, but I came to really love to drink hot water. I wanted to talk about classrooms, and then I realized my time's probably almost up. So as you can see, we had to ride the school bus from the old campus to the new campus. That was about an hour ride each way. And then if you missed the bus, you had to take the city bus, which could be really crowded and take longer. I usually went 2 or 3 days a week to the new campus to teach. The classes were in 2-hour blocks with a break, we take a little break in the middle. The students are in cohorts. So they're all together so I taught the freshman English majors and the sophomore English majors and then the senior English majors. And the seniors had been together for 4 years, like sitting in every single class together, which is a lot different than the way our students study. But they knew each other really well, which could be good and also could be bad if you're a foreign teacher and you don't know anything. Most of the classrooms, the seats are bolted to the floor and like benches, and they're facing the front. And they didn't really have Wi-Fi in the classroom, so we had to put everything on PowerPoint. So I felt like I learned a lot of creative ways to do what I wanted to do with what I had available to me, which has helped me in the pandemic too. I also helped Lucy to make an online class. So this is a picture of us. We actually went to a TV studio and they filmed me reading about APA style to make a video for an online class, which was different than we do it here. The little guy in the middle is them celebrating China Space Day at the university because they teach aeronautics and astronautics, physics, and material science are the big areas of study. And so all of China was celebrating Chinese space exploration, and the location for that celebration was NPU. And then because we only go to campus a little bit, we work from home. So this is me working in a coffee shop, and this is my son learning French from a PhD student from Burundi in a coffee shop. And then I'm gonna skip ahead because I know that it's time for me to wrap up. My son and I we ended up running a 5K on the Great Wall of China. It was supposed to be a half marathon. And we got there and we looked at all the stairs and we were like, how about we drop down to the 5K? And that worked out. Then I also did the color run with my friends from Rwanda and Burundi, which was pretty fun. And then, so it was a 5K, just like here, people throw colors at you and there was a drone filming us. And Xi'an is really important on the Silk Road, and so there's a lot of religions that converge there. So even though you can't be in the Communist Party and be religious, there's still people practicing religion. So it's a big center for Islam. These ladies and this man, this is a Muslim restaurant that we like to eat at a lot that was near the campus. And this is the Great Mosque. Islam is really great for tourism in Xi'an. They have a street called Muslim Street. And so Muslims are allowed to practice. And then they also at the campus have a lot of students from South Asia who are practicing Muslims. So Xi'an is kind of proud of their Muslim heritage, even though you're not really supposed to practice. Also, Catholicism came from, the Germans brought it actually, which was not how I thought it would have gotten to China, and is still practiced. And we joined a Catholic church and they had an English service. And so we got to worship with people from all over the world. This is our priest. He's a Chinese priest. And they also had 6 services that were all in Chinese for Chinese worshipers. And there were towns that were actually all Chinese Catholics. The whole town is just full of people who are Chinese Catholics. But the issue of religion is that they don't want the Pope telling everybody what to do. So you can be a Chinese Catholic, but Chinese Catholic priests and bishops get into an awkward situation with the government because they're not supposed to be taking orders from the Pope. But of course, and I told one of my colleagues, well, Chinese people don't have any religion, because my Chinese colleagues were like, no, we're not religious. And my British colleague was like, yeah, but they do a lot of things that look like religion to me, because there's a lot of rituals that look like ancestor worship. There's a lot of memorizing the works of Confucius. And there are people, even some of the practices of Chinese medicine are still connecting back to the ancient religious practices, even if maybe there's still separation and secularization of some of those things. But I think that is probably where I should leave it. These are some views from the campus and a really beautiful park called the Dianyuan Park. So I think I will see if I can stop sharing.
Thank you, Beth. We So many interesting questions and experiences in China. You mentioned right at the beginning connecting with students from China while you were still here. And that is one of the things I love about online education, is it really does open up those kinds of new opportunities that maybe we haven't so much taken advantage of in the past. So during this time of online education, we're coming up with new ideas and new practices, and students, you're going to see more of that in the future. But our final speaker is Sheila Phillip, and Sheila, your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I have retired from Johnson County Community College, but while I was there, I developed and taught a class in Introduction to Japanese Culture. And I've had lots of good international experience at the college, but I'm going to pay attention to Japan today. When I was teaching that class, I would always ask the students the first day, what brings you to this class? What brings you to Japanese culture? And most of them said it was anime and the resultant cosplay that they'd gotten involved in. And some said, well, sushi. And some said, well, I took Japanese language, and that kind of got me interested in the culture. For me, it was because when I was growing up in Hays, Kansas, my parents each year, as the holidays approached, would call the dean of students and find out if there were international students who weren't going to be able to go home over the semester break because they couldn't afford to. And we had lots of different international students in our house for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, including one year a student from Japan. And that kind of got me hooked on Japan, was what I learned from him, and then studying kabuki theater as well. So I've got, I do want to do a screen share here. Let me get set up here. Come on, wake up, share. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Japan, not either or, but both and. So one of the things that I find most interesting about Japan, and that kind of has influenced me the most, is their really easy acceptance of what I call plurality. Being really open-minded and accepting of several seemingly opposite or contrasting ideas at the same time. So instead of either or, I think of Japan as both and. I coined a word in my class, bothness. Not really a word, but I liked it because bothness is okay in Japan. We in the West tend to see things as either or. We prefer one thing over another, or one way of thinking over another way of thinking. And if, for example, if I were to ask you, what kind of music do you like? You would probably list one genre. A few might say, oh, I like techno dance music and country music and classical music, but probably not very many of you would say that. Or if I ask what religious faith you follow, it's very unlikely that you would say, I'm Baptist and Jewish, okay? But a Japanese person might be okay with something like that. They tend to be really accepting of plurality in the world around them. And it comes from the way Japan has always seemed to import and digest ideas, objects, or activities that they like from other cultures. What's interesting to me is that they adapt those things and make them uniquely Japanese. So I want to give you a few examples of that. By around the year 200 before the Common Era, the native people of Japan had already begun importing pottery making skills from the Korean Peninsula, as well as cultural customs and beliefs that developed into Shinto. And Shinto is considered Japan's great contribution to world religions. It's their original religion, if you will. And I want to say I use that word religion carefully because it isn't really religion the way we think of religions in the West. And then by the 6th century, the people of Japan had borrowed China's writing system and they were trying to apply it to their language, which wasn't always entirely successful. And they had also imported Buddhism from China at the same time. So the slide you see right now is kind of a comparison of real basics about Shinto and Buddhism, particularly Zen Buddhism. But the interesting thing is that Buddhism, as taught as a belief system, is really tolerant of other belief systems, and it sits side by side with the tenets of Shinto in a really easy way. There's a saying in Japan that you are born Shinto and you die Buddhist. And it's because in Shinto, there's a kind of blessing ceremony for new babies at the local shrine, but there's no funeral ceremony at all. But in Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism, there is a ceremony upon death. So funerals are Buddhist in nature, while blessings for babies are Shinto in nature. But think about that for a minute. It would seem a little odd in this country unless a person had converted from one religion to another. They wouldn't be both. But in many Japanese homes, you will see both an altar for the Shinto faith called the Kamidana and another altar for the Buddhist called Butsudan. And these are pictures of Kamidana and Butsudan that you can order these online and have them in your home if you like. And there are lots of examples of this, of how they've taken things in and sort of made them their own. One of them is baseball in Japan. We have some 30 teams in the professional league in North America, and Japan has only 12 professional teams. If a game is tied, they will play however many innings in this country to get to whoever is the winner, but they have a 12-inning limit to the regular season games, and everybody's okay if the final score is tied. And we wouldn't live with that. We wouldn't tolerate that in the West. We want a winner. It's not unusual to see a family that's dressed up, and some of them are in traditional kimono and others are in Western wear. There's the father wearing a Western style suit. Both is okay. You will often see modern and traditional side by side. The picture on the left, the building you see on the side is the I House, the International House in Tokyo. And it's kind of cool. You have to be a member to stay there. And I was able to stay there the first time I was in Japan in 2003 because our group leader was a member and he arranged for our whole group to stay there. But what's interesting is it's kind of rectangular and fairly modern looking, but it juts right out over a traditional Japanese garden and you can see the traditional lantern there. The picture on the right is the Meiji Shrine in the middle of Tokyo, with a skyscraper in the background. So you see old and new juxtaposed with each other in Japan. I'm a great lover of Japanese gardens. You can see a Japanese garden image behind me on my screen, but they appreciate both very geometric designs like the one on the right. That's the Abbot's Garden at at Tofukuji Monastery. And they also like irregular and naturalistic garden design, as you see on the left. Some additional examples of things they've pulled from the West and made entirely their own and therefore are maybe almost unrecognizable to us. The next slide is going to show you some images of how they celebrate Christmas. Even though only 1.5% of the population of Japan identifies as Christian, they celebrate Christmas. And so they have Colonel Sanders dressed as Santa Claus. They have a little girl in a Christmas cosplay outfit. And I'm particularly fond of Godzilla Christmas tree at the mall on the bottom there. I think that's fairly cool. So when I, let me move along here. Here we go. Next one. They have adopted cowboy culture, many of them. there's cowboy bar and a couple with cowboy hats, and they see themselves as independent, just like a cowboy would be managing their herds. On the left, you see a picture of a Prussian officer, maybe that's Wilhelm, and the Meiji emperor who lived from 1872 to 1912, decided he liked the Western Prussian look and designed a uniform for himself that's even more ornate than the German Prussian was. Another aspect of the society and culture in Japan is the individual's role in the larger group. Okay. And this is especially important to Japanese people, and doing their part for the good of the whole group is really seen as kind of an obligation. That seems to me really different than the way we operate socially in the United States. In some ways, we see ourselves as distinct individuals who are free to do or say or act any way we want to, but that's not how it is in Japan. In Japan, it's unseemly to rock the boat. So let's take the case of, let's say, a businesswoman who's on her way to work in the morning. One thing you learn is that the trains in Japan run absolutely on time, and they don't stay in the station for very long. So let's say this businesswoman is running for the train and the doors close in her face before she can board. What you would see would be a little smile on her face that is accepting of the fact that she was late, and she'll step back to wait for the next train. There would be no shouting, no swearing, no histrionics. But I think about when I've taken the bus, if I'm late and the bus leaves without me because I wasn't at the bus stop on time, it puts me at the very least probably in a cranky mood. I try not to take that out on other people, but I know we've all witnessed people, something goes wrong and they're cursing and they're cussing out other people around them. And it would just be very unlikely to see that in Japan. So another difference, when COVID raised its mighty head in late February and March of this year, we saw US citizens jammed into grocery stores, hoarding everything from toilet paper to hand sanitizer to food and bottled water. And we were kind of crazy in our attempts to buy up everything we could get our hands on. Unfortunately, there were a few people who monopolized and bought cases and cases of hand sanitizer, then tried to sell it back at huge prices to make a profit off of our fellow citizens. In contrast to that, when the tsunami and the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster occurred on March 11th, 2011 in Japan, this is an overhead image of Japanese citizens lined up in long queues, waiting for their turn for supplies. And I can't imagine United States citizens doing that, honestly. We would crush at the door, trying to burst our way in. There's an awful lot to say and understand about any new culture you're studying, and it's kind of like an iceberg. I really like this image a lot, because you can readily see and understand the little bit that's above the water, but there's a whole lot more under the surface that you can't see right away. And that's true when people come to our country and try to learn about our culture. But it's really true as we look at Japanese culture too. One of my Japanese culture students called it a beast. It's a beast to learn about another culture. But I hope what I've shared with you today gives you a little bit of insight. Some of it's kind of amusing. The Godzilla Christmas tree, Gojira, was pretty cool, but I hope it's also helpful and interesting to you all.
Thank you, Sheila. Bothness. I love that word.
Bothness,
I want to
yeah.
remember that. Yeah, bothness, that you can, you don't have to always just pick one idea and fight to the death for it, or fight to the death at all. Why not step back when the bus door closes?
Absolutely.
So we have quite a few questions, and I'm going to try to get through them, keep putting them in there. First of all, Chef Prater, there were quite a number of questions, a lot of them centered on the question of odd things you had eaten or ingredients you had used. And you'll have to unmute yourself.
That's a long list. But I think one of the ones that was probably the most striking to me was durian in Thailand. It is a very strong smell. I was actually standing next to an elephant, and I couldn't smell the elephant when I first smelled durian. It's somewhere between like some sort of really sweet pastry and rotting meat. And the flesh is it's sort of custardy. So when you pick it up, it's like stringy and wet, and it's hard to get past. If you can stomach it, the taste is delicious, but the aroma can be too much. We cooked with some silkworm larvae in Korea. That's a very popular street food in the region I was in. And so there would be these big woks on the street corner where someone would be filling like little paper cones like you drink water out of with silkworm larvae that you used a toothpick to like pop them in your mouth. That was not my favorite thing I've ever eaten. Yeah, those would probably be spinal cord, grilled spinal cord is not a favorite of mine either. There's a lot of them. I can keep going.
My Chinese son-in-law tells me that durian is delicious. I don't know if I could ever get past the smell.
I have had it cooked in some things or turned into some pastries where the flavor is the aroma is gone, but you get the flavor, and it is good. But ripe fresh durian is something. And we went to a durian plantation, and they're so heavy and big. They have these giant nets. Basically, the only way to know if a durian is ripe is if it falls. But they're so heavy and big that they actually fall, and like at least one durian harvester is killed every year because they will just fall and crush you essentially. So they have these giant nets. You walk around a durian orchard and it looks, you look up and there's just a net, and every once in a while there's a hole where a giant durian just tears through it.
Wow.
Aaron, in Singapore, I put in a chat. They actually have a sign on the metro and subway. They have a big red cross through the durian. Not allowed to bring that on the metro.
Same
smell.
Yeah. Same in Thailand. It's the national fruit of Thailand, but they don't let it in public spaces.
So Professor Ghali, there was a question about how being together in China for a year and traveling in such a different cultural environment had impacted maybe you personally or your family or your group together.
Yeah, so I feel like my family's pretty close already, but I feel like it made us really even more of a team. Unfortunately, my older son was not with us. He was here in the US going to JCCC. But my younger son and my husband and I, we feel like we kind of mark our family life by like before we went to China and after we went to China, because it made us really bond closely together.
Back to community. I noticed all three of you talked about community. Aaron talked about how food brings us together no matter who we are. And Sheila talked about just a sense of the good of community. And Beth talked about that cohort idea of education, that you're together with the same people for 4 years and you form community. And I think all of us are thinking about a lot more community a lot more now during this time where we're kind of socially distanced. And I know I'm thinking about it and missing a lot of you, but it's great to be together in times like this online. We appreciate that. Sheila, what is your most memorable experience in Japan? I know you had many.
There are two, actually. I think the first one was a half day that we spent at Tofukuji Monastery, talking with the abbot there about Buddhism, about American Buddhism, and one of our group leaders had to translate everything for him, but we got to tour the monastery, we got to practice meditation, we had a wonderful meal there. It was quite wonderful and relaxing. And the other most memorable experience was visiting in Hiroshima, the International Peace Park, and seeing the atomic bomb dome and learning about just how horrible the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were. and how the people of Japan have let that shape their belief about peace throughout the world.
Yeah, that would be sobering. Beth, let me ask you the same question. What is a very memorable experience from your time in China?
Well, we met this professor from the Normal University through the Catholic Church that we went to. And he was his name was Professor Wu, and he was a biology professor, and he had studied the Chinese salamander, which is this giant salamander. In fact, there was a salamander named after the one that they had in the London Zoo was named after him. It was named Professor Wu from this professor. And he took us up into the Qingling Mountains to the place where the scientists study the giant salamanders. And I guess we weren't supposed to be there. He told my husband, I'm telling them I'm bringing foreign colleagues from biology. Just don't say anything to them. And Jeremy was like, oh. So we kind of went through a bunch of checkpoints in a place where I think we weren't supposed to be. But we got to see a whole bunch of giant Chinese salamanders in the wild up on this mountain, which was just like, the mountains were really beautiful too. It was quite a beautiful adventure.
Well, that sounds really unique. Aaron, same question to you. Of all the places you visited, a memorable experience.
I'll go with two. One was in Hong Kong. I stopped at a Spanish restaurant. Hong Kong is built on the side of a mountain, and so there's these public escalators. Instead of the sidewalk, you just hop on the escalator. And I was going to meet some British expats, and I just hopped off the escalator looking for some dinner and walked into this restaurant that I didn't know anything about. But it was I had sea bass baked in a clay pot with pearl onions, cherry tomatoes, and cumin seed. And it was probably the most important meal I've ever had in my whole life, because I was starting to place aromas and tastes with particular spices and put names to things. I was still a writer at this point, not a cook. And I was able to just identify so much, and it just opened up my whole world. So a Spanish restaurant in Hong Kong, and then a Japanese or Chinese restaurant in Japan. I had shark fin soup. And this was back in 1996. So this was before we really knew how bad that was. It was an amazing soup. It was one of the greatest soups I ever had, but it showed me how important my choices as a cook are for sustainability reasons, right? And this was something that was really wonderful. And a long time ago, when so few people could afford shark fin, it wasn't necessarily a problem, even though the harvesting was still an issue. Now that you have such a growing middle and upper class in China, and more people want those shark fins, they're taking the sharks, cutting the fins, and throwing the fish back, and it just decimating the shark population. So those two dishes opened my eyes to two major things in my career. One, just what food really can and should be, and how to treat it, and then one, what is my impact as a professional in the world? If I put something on the menu that is endangered, I'm contributing to the problem.
Well, thank you. It is 3:00. We try to end on time. I really want to thank our panelists today, Aaron, Beth, and Sheila. You have done an awesome, just given us such an overview of Asia, and we appreciate your time. We appreciate your attendance here. Students, we appreciate you coming. If for any reason you need us to confirm that you were present, we're happy to do that. And for everybody, next week, we're taking a break from this series. We're going to have 2 events on Wednesday and 3 events on Thursday for our Peace Building Conference. They're all going to center around the topic of peace building or social justice in Kansas City. So talking about homelessness, talking about racism, talking about healthcare inequality, somebody from the Poor People's Campaign, and our last speaker Thursday evening at 6:30 is going to be Mayor Quentin Lucas from Kansas City, Missouri, talking about gun violence. We have a website for that, or you can contact our office. We'd love to help you get registered. So much to think about, and choices that we can make. I love how Aaron finished it with each of us, our own choices can make a difference. So it's great to see you. Thanks for coming. Have a great rest of the afternoon.